Hello students, we have completed the 4 modules starting with your 5th module. So 5th module talks about your mass storage. So what is your mass storage? That is your secondary storage structure. So here we will be looking into how a secondary storage structure is managed. So what are again we will also be scheduling the storage struct, that is your secondary storage as well, and what are the various scheduling algorithms that is available, and also we will see how could we improve the performance of your secondary storage, what are the characteristics, what are the things that it could affect the storage device, how is that we could improve. All that is what we will be addressing in your mass storage structure. So when I say mass storage structure, secondary storage, that is your hard disk. Hard disk, or we also call it your magnetic disk. Many a times when we were discussing about your sequential access, random access, tape drives, I have given you the example of your hard disk and what is the internal structure of your hard disk as well. So let us look into in detail and in particular. So this is the structure of your hard disk that lies internally. So as said in the start, hard disk is something that provides a bulk storage and it also provides a permanent storage. It is a non-volatile storage. Now this hard disk, if you have just seen it generally in your desktops, you would have just seen an empty sealed box, but what is there in that empty sealed box, it looks something like this. There are disk platters that is in circular shape. It is just like your CD, but your CD you will be writing only on one side. Here you can write on both the sides, up as well as down. Both the sides it is made of a magnetic material. So two surfaces are covered with magnetic material and you could be storing information on the platter by recording it magnetically. And then you can notice here we have the read write heads. So there is a read write head here and there is a read write head here as well. So as I told, the platter is coated with magnetic material on both the surfaces. So there is a read write head which is used to read the content on the both the surfaces. And this read write head is attached to this arm assembly. So this disk arm assembly is the one that moves the read write head. So this moves the read write head forward and backward, and the read write heads will be flying on the disk. It never touches your disk. So if it happens, or if a read write head is bent or due to some mechanical movements, if the read write head happen to touch the platter, we say the data is corrupted and no more eligible to be used. So the read write head will never touch your platter. It only flies over the platter, and the magnetic field that is there is the one that is going to record the information. So the next thing that we have is about the division of this platter. So this platter is logically divided into tracks. You can see this circles. So this circles goes on up till the end, and this is your tracks, and this track is again subdivided into sectors. You can see a little darker blue here, that is your sector. So you will have multiple tracks that come until the end, and all of that is divided into sectors, and these set of tracks that are at one arm position makes it a cylinder. You can see here all the tracks at this position, that is your cylinder. And there may be thousands of concentric cylinders in a disk drive, and each track may contain hundreds of sectors. Now, how do we decide the speed of the hard disk, or what does the hard disk speed guided with? So the speed of the hard disk depends on two factors, that is the transfer rate and the positioning time. I have discussed to you previously also. Now we will look that in detail and with appropriate terminologies. The other thing that I forgot is about your spindle. You can see here in the center. So this is used to rotate your disk, and this is used to move the read write head forward and backward. So the disk will be rotated and positioned, and the read write head will move forward and backward for the appropriate data. For example, if I want to read this dark blue, so the spindle is going to rotate it here, and the read write head will move it forward to read. So all this is going to take some time, and that is what is about your transfer rate and the positioning time. So transfer rate is a rate at which the data flow between the computer and the drive, that is your system and the hard disk. In the coming slides, I think 2 slides down, we will also see what are the connections, how is your hard disk connected to the system. So what are the buses and the cabling technology. So what is the time that is taken? Now for example, if I say you have your file program1.c, now when you say control S, that when you save your program1.c, so from your main memory it is going to that secondary storage or hard disk. At what rate does it transfer? The second thing it talks about is the positioning time. So I gave you an example previously where the spindle has to rotate and the read write head has to come to the position. So that is the positioning time. So the positioning time is guided with the seek time and the rotational latency. What is the seek time? It is the time that is required for the disk arm to move to the desired cylinder. And what is the rotational latency? It is the time that is taken for the disk to rotate to the desired sector and bring that sector under the disk head. So as I told you when I was explaining, so this is about your head crash. As I told you, the read write heads will never come in contact with the platter. If it comes in contact with the platter, it is treated as the data under that would be corrupted. So that is what we call it as a head crash, where even the read write head would crash. This is just a small image that I got to show was when it was created. I think you have seen it in many of your messages and over the internet. the size of the system, the size of the hard disk when it was created, and what is its size today. Now, talking about the connection of this hard disk to the computer, I think you would have noticed this if you open the cabinet of your desktop. You can notice there would be a hard disk slot and there will be some wires running to your motherboard. So hard disk can be removed, which allows you can mount it on another system as well. So this hard disk is attached to the computer by some IO buses, and there are different types of IO buses that is used. That is your ATA, SATA, FC, that is SESI, CASI, and all this are used. Each one comes with its own advantages, disadvantages, and the speed at which the transfer rate that we talk about is the number of, the bandwidth at which it works. So each one comes with different bandwidth. IDE is something not in use today. SATA and ATA is something that is in use. And when we go for a very large storage such as over the network, so fiber channel is something that is preferred. So these are some of the cabling technology, or these are actually the cables, but these cables follow these protocols. So that gives the protocol the cable follows is where it gets its name from. So these cables are used. If you remember, when I was using my classes with the laptop, I actually needed a wire that could connect to the port there for the projector. So that is one of your SATA port. So why did I quote that example is I had to connect it to the projector for me to display. Similarly, the hard disk also had to be connected to your motherboard for the transfer of data. So here these are the cabling technologies that is available. The next thing that we have is about your hard disk performance. So what guides your hard disk performance? Before we look into the problem and a small example, these are some of the information about the standard performances that is available in the market. Now the spindle, that is rotation, RPM is your rotation per minute. If the rotation per minute is 4200, then the average latency that is possible is 7.14 millisecond. So you can have your hard disk that is ranging from 30 GB to 3 terabyte, and these are some of the transfer rate, that is 6 gigahertz per second, and then the seek time would vary from 3 milliseconds to 12 milliseconds. And what can be the latency of the spindle, that it is, and all that is these are some of the standards that is available in the market. Now let us see how do we calculate your access latency or the hard disk performance. So as I discussed to you earlier, so the performance is dependent on the average seek time and the latency, that is the rotational latency. Now the average IO time is given by the seek time, the amount of data transfer, and the controller overhead. Now let us take an example. Now if the system wants to read a 4 KB block, so in the previous modules we have seen that your hard disk or your secondary storage is logically seen as a set of blocks, but the user or the programmers or the application sees it as a set of blocks, but the system the device is only going to read it as your sector, track and cylinder, but sector, track, cylinder language is not understood by your application. We only see to a number of blocks. So if I want to read a block of size 4 KB, and this is the specification of the hard disk. So the hard disk I have has the rotational speed of 7200 rotations per minute. These are the standard specifications that you get when you buy a hard disk, and that has a 5 millisecond average seek time, and the transfer rate is 1 gigabits per second. And the controller overhead here we are talking about the device controller. Every device is attached with a device controller. I think I'm not getting deep there. These are the concepts that you would have already studied in your computer organization. So the device controller overhead is 0.1 millisecond. So given this data, you just substitute it here to this, and your average IO time to read 4 KB block is 9.3 milliseconds. So this is how you would be calculating your performance of the hard disk. So the specifications would be given. You have to just substitute it, and you have to check the time that it takes. The next thing that we have is about your solid state disk. These days you can see because of the speed that we are looking for, so most of your smartphones or nowadays even laptops are shifting to SSD. So a solid state, the solid state disk is also a non-volatile memory. It can be used like your hard disk, but it is more expensive than compared to your hard disk. And the disadvantage here could be it is more expensive and it has less capacity than compared to your hard disk, but it is more reliable and it uses less power. And that is the reason in most of the portable devices we can see this SSD card. So as I told you previously, we had SSD cards only in the notebooks. Now even laptops are shifting to the SSD card because of the less power consumption that it takes. So this is just a glimpse of the other storage medium that is available. The next thing that we have is about your magnetic tape. So I have spoke about your magnetic tapes a couple of times when we have discussed about your sequential access. So magnetic tape was a form of secondary storage medium that was available earlier, that is before the invention of your hard disk. Probably magnetic tape was the source of storage that was available. But if the question is the magnetic tape still in use? Yes, magnetic tape is still in use when they have to migrate large amount of data, and it is also used for the purpose of backup. So the disadvantage of magnetic tape is a simple comparison with your sequential access and random access. So your hard disk gives you random access, whereas your tape drive gives you sequential access. So we have already seen sequential access is very time consuming and it is quite slow, and the transfer rate of your magnetic tape is also very. Next concept that we have is about your disk structure. So the hard disk drive are addressed as a large one-dimensional array of logical blocks, As I told you, the logical address that we look into has blocks. We have seen it in many examples in the previous modules where we address as block number 10, block number 20, 25. So this is the logical address that is known by the application. So the logical block is the smallest unit of transfer that happens from the disk to the main memory or from the main memory to the disk. Now there could raise a question how this one-dimensional array of logical block is mapped to the sectors of the disk sequentially. So here the disk 0 of the first sector of the first track of the outermost cylinder, the mapping proceeds in the order through the tracks. So it goes from outside to the inside. So it moves from the outermost to the innermost. As I showed you in the example of the image of your platter, where there are circles that goes throughout your platter, so it is going to read from the outermost to the innermost, and the conversion of the logical address to the physical address should be done with ease. There should be mechanisms and algorithms that makes a easy conversion of this logical address. So my logical address is the block number. The physical address the device understands is the track sector cylinder. So that block number should be converted or should be identified by the appropriate track sector and cylinder. The next thing that we have is about the disk attachment. Now if I say I have a hard disk, now I can be attaching this hard disk locally or I could be doing it remotely. How am I doing it locally? How am I doing it remotely is what we will just have a small glimpse about it, because each of these concepts by itself is a subject. So when I say the computer access this disk storage, it can be doing it in two ways, that is locally via the IO ports, or it can be doing it remotely over the network. So when it is doing it locally, we call it HAS, that is host attached storage. So it is accessing the disk via IO ports, and these ports have several technologies. So we have already discussed previously, that is the cabling technology that it uses, an IDE, SATA, CASI, and there are different architecture each of it follows. Now if it is using an SESI or CASI cabling, then you have it uses the master slave, or we call it the initiator and target logic. So where there is a request and then there is an action or the task that is performed. So if the main memory is trying to read from the hard disk, the main memory, that is the port on the main memory or your motherboard, becomes the initiator, and the port that is available on the hard disk becomes the target. And as I told it to you earlier, the other cabling technology that is currently in use today is your FC, that is fiber channel, which is used on the high-end workstations. So the speed of the fiber channel is very, very high, and the addressing capacity it has is also very high. Now this is something that's done locally. when we have to do it remotely is where we have a storage array. Now, storage array is, you can imagine, has one big rack that is filled with hard disk. So it is you have multiple hard disk that is stacked together is your storage array, and it has a controller and it comes with various ports and technologies. I think storage area network is a subject that you have in your 7th semester as an elective. It is a very huge subject. So what is the concept of storage area network is, now when you have the hard disk that is connected to a particular device or the server, your storage is limited only to the capacity of that particular specification of that server. Now for example, I have a server and I am giving 1 terabyte of hard disk to that server. When my application reaches that 1 terabyte, probably I would have to install another server to satisfy my storage. So what it came up with is to separate the server and the storage. So you can notice here in the image here, so you have the server and over the network you have the storage. Now the storage is no more limited to the server's capacity of hard disk. There is a huge storage. As I told you, a storage array is a huge bulk of hard disk that is racked up together. So the server gets connected. So the server here acts as an intermediate that is used for computing and transferring your data to the storage. Now your cloud computing and all the big words that we hear, or all your popular applications that is there on cloud, all of it uses the concept of your storage area network. The cloud computing has its foundation in storage area network. Cloud computing is a technology of managing this, but how it is managed is what you will see in your storage area network. So the storage is separated from the server, so it is no more dependent and the application can independently grow to the size that it wants. So that is about where we have the SAN network, and SAN network is guided by the fiber channel technology, which uses a high speed transmission. Now if you're opening your Google account or your Facebook or your Insta accounts, you're getting your data in a fraction of second. So that data that is arrived in a fraction of second, that is because of your fiber channel technology that is provided. And the other thing that we have about your storage is your NAS, which is a small variation of your SAN. Network attached storage is an infrastructure that is basically built for handling files. So previously we had a dedicated file server to handle the file and the file system. Now that can be done remotely by this special purpose storage system, that is your NAS. And the NAS again comes with a small box that is a NAS head, and which is going to work via remote procedure calls, and it can be using some of your NFS and CIFS protocols. And to put it in a nutshell, NAS is basically used to handle files remotely. Now what you could do of handling files, having a dedicated file system locally on your desktop or laptop, you can do the exact operations remotely. That is opening a file, reading a file, appending a file. So the last module that we saw about your file system and file system structure, everything that we discussed, what happens locally, that can be done with ease remotely, that is over the network using your NAS. And as I told you, NAS is a small variation that we have towards your SAN. NAS and SAN is implemented in the same infrastructure, but this is a little more specialized to handle file and file system. Now, having said about the introduction of what is a storage and what are the various mediums that is available for storage and what are the ways that we have that we could be storing locally and remotely, the next thing that we will see is about your disk scheduling. So what is disk scheduling? So now we have the data that is to be written or read, that is to be accessed from the disk. So how is that accessed? And we have also seen how do we calculate the access time and what is the delay that is added to the access time. So when there is a delay that is added to your access time, definitely it will have its impact on the performance. So if I am trying to access a data on the disk, the faster it gives me my data, I say the performance is good. The slower it gives me my data, I say the performance is bad. So how do I improve that performance? If it is slow, how do I make it fast? What are the algorithms that are available for scheduling the disk access is what we will be addressing to. Now, as seen earlier, the access time depends on the seek time and the rotational latency. The disk bandwidth is the total number of bytes that is transferred, and we have seen to the equations there, it is divided by the total time between the first request of service and the completion of the last transfer. Now we can improve both the access time and the bandwidth by managing the order in which the disk IO requests are serviced. So whenever a process needs an IO to or from the disk, it issues a system call to the operating system. The request specifies several information, whether this operation is an input operation or an output operation, what the disk address for the transfer is, what memory address for the transfer is, what are the number of sectors it needs to be transferred. If the desired disk drive and the controller are available, the request can be serviced immediately. If the disk or the controller is busy, and any new request for service will be placed in the queue of pending request for the drive. Now, from this queue, how do we satisfy the request? How does the operating choose the request, and how do we service it next? What is the algorithm to decide which request do I pick up is all about your disk scheduling algorithm. Let us look into it one by one. So here is an example that is there. So if I have a request that is queued up, I have, these are the positions that I have, and the head pointer is at 53. Now what happens with each algorithm? Now let us see. The first algorithm that we have is the FCFS. So as the title stands, first come first serve. So the requests are serviced in the same order that it is received. So continuing the example that we saw in the last slide. So these are the block numbers, and now the read write head is at the block number 53. Now if I service the request in the order, I'm sorry, this is cylinder number 53, and these are the requests that is lined up for the various cylinders. Now if I, as the algorithm tells, first come first serve, so it is going to, from 53 it is going to move to 98, and from 98 it is going to move to 183. 183 it is moving back to 37, and from 37 it is moving to 122. 122 it is again moving back to 14. From 14 it is again moving ahead to 124, and from 124 it is moving back to 65 and then 67. And this could be some of the problems that can be asked in your internals and externals on disk scheduling. So these are the representations that is required. So students, you can see here in the disk scheduling, so we can see that there is a lot. See, when we started the discussion about your disk scheduling, so the seek time is something that matters. Now you can see the read write heads that is moving across. I mean, the head movement is too many. It is moving further, it is again moving backward. Now you can see, if you calculate the total number of head counts, so it is taking 640 head movements. So it is, we are deducting 98 minus 53, 183 minus 98, that is 53 to 98. So the head movement that it is taking is 45. So like that we calculate for each of it, where the total number of head movement we get is 640, which is very high. And as we all know, in every case of your first come first serve, the algorithm and implementation is definitely simple, but it is not an efficient algorithm to be picked up, because we can see the service is definitely not fast. The next algorithm we have is the shortest seek time first, that is SSTF. So this algorithm will select the request with minimum seek time from the current head position. If the position is at 53, from the queue it will look for the request that is closer to 53. Now we will see the same example. So these are my requests that is there in the queue. So it is very similar. It is better that I would be sorting this request with the reference of the head position. So to my head position, the nearest one is 65 and 67. So I will be satisfying the request of cylinder number 65 and then 67. After that, something that is close to me is 37, and then it goes to 98, 122, 124, 81, 83 is the request that it is lastly satisfying. So I believe I've made it clear. From the current head position, whichever is closer, it is going to satisfy that request. So for the same example, so if we calculate the head movement of each request, and finally the total head movement is 236. So previously the same request, then the same queue, the total head movements was 640, which is very high than compared to this. And the advantage, definitely it is much more faster than compared to the previous example. It is more optimal, but the disadvantage is the request that is very far may end up in starvation, so it has to continuously wait. Now that is if the request 183, if it had multiple, again if I say there were some more requests that was closer to this, then 183 had to wait for a very long time. The next algorithm that we have is scan. So this algorithm works very similar to an elevator algorithm. I think in your microprocessor you have seen how an elevator works. So it moves up and moves down, and just a normal elevator, it just goes up and goes down, and whenever it is going down, it will pick up people which is going down. Whenever it is going up, it will pick up people who wants to go up. The same thing happens here. The disk arm starts from one end of the platter or the disk to other end. The disk move towards the other end, servicing the request as it reaches. So whichever cylinder request it encounters on the way, it goes servicing that. The direction of the head movement is again reversed, and again it starts continuing. As I told you the example of the elevator, so whoever is going up, it will take them up, whoever is coming down, it will take them down. So when it is moving forward, whichever there is a request that needs to be satisfied, it is going to satisfy. Again, when the read write heads is moving backward, if there is any request that is there, it is going to satisfy that. Let us see how it works for the same example. Now again, my starting point is 53. So 53 is now first scanning front. So when it is scanning front, it is going to touch the 0, and again it is going to come back to 199. From 53, when it is going forward, it has two requests that it can satisfy, that is 37 and 14. Now again the read write head starts its movement from 0 to 199. So on the way from 0, when it is moving to 199, it encounters the request 65, and then 67, and then 98, and then 122, and then 124, and then finally 83. So scan is going to work like the elevator algorithm, where it is moving forward and backward. So before we apply the scan algorithm, we need to know the current direction of the head movement as well, whether the head is moving towards 0 or whether the head is moving towards 99. It could have happened like this as well. From 53 it could have moved forward, and then from 99 it could have moved backward as well. So we need to know the current direction of the head movement in case of the scan. The disadvantage here is, if the request arrives just when the head is moved ahead, that is, now I have a request when the read write head has just moved from 0 it has moved to 65, and I get a request for, let me say, 60, then this request 60 have to wait until the read write heads finishes here, and again it reaches back, and again when it comes back it has to wait until then. So for the same example, the total head movements are 236. This is also less when compared to FCFS.